When you think of the best wrestler versus wrestler fight in the UFC, a lot of people would probably mention Kamaru Usman versus Kobe Covington. As great as that fight was, I just don't think it's the best example of wrestling because they were striking for the most part. If I wanted to watch the best kickboxing, I'd probably tune into Adesanya versus Pereira, not Kamaru Usman landing a 1-2 over and over again. Another honorable mention is Arman Tsarukyan versus Mateusz Gamrot. This is one of my favorite fights, but I just felt like if it wasn't Arman Tsarukyan having the better of the exchanges on the feet, it was Mateusz Gamrot shooting for blind single and double legs, then landing clinch knees. The last two I'm going to mention is Kamaru Usman versus Khamzat Chimaev and Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. I enjoyed both of these fights, but the problem with Khamzat versus Kamaru was that it was very one-sided wrestling wise, and I just didn't feel like I saw enough dynamic techniques for me to really place this at number one. Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan might actually be the first, but I still have to go back and make an analysis of each round. Then I'll report back to you in a second video. The criteria of this video isn't based on who the best wrestler was. I'm more focused on takedowns, the range of techniques used, the mat returns, the cage control, the judo throws, etc. And for it to be the best wrestler versus wrestler fight, it has to encompass all, if not most, of these aspects. And I can't think of any other fight other than Movsar Evloev versus Aljamain Sterling or Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. For today, the video is going to be based on Movsar versus Aljo. Firstly, let's talk about takedowns. If there's one thing I hate about some wrestlers in the UFC, it's that they shoot for blind takedowns. It can work for you if you time it correctly and you're very explosive and athletic, but as time goes on, your opponent is going to pick up on that and make you pay for it. Amir Khani had to get finished by Lerone Murphy because he was shooting for blind takedowns. The sucky part was that he was winning in the first round, then in the second round, Lerone made the read and made him pay for it. Mateusz Gamrot is another perfect example. Early on in his career, he was doing very well, shooting for blind takedowns. Against Arman Tsarukyan, it worked very well for him. But when he faced Dan Hooker, you could see that he was no longer in his prime, and Dan made him pay for it, attempting guillotines and landing elbows. But for some reason, Aljamain Sterling is not that type of guy. He looks like someone who would shoot for blind takedowns. He's probably done it a few times in his career, like when he got knocked out by Marlon Morales. But still, I just don't think he does it that much these days. Maybe he has PTSD from that fight because in his fight against Sean O'Malley, he attempted two takedowns. And while that is a low number, it's still important to note that one of them was a setup where he feinted upstairs, then went for the double leg. And the other one, he intercepted Sean O'Malley while he was moving laterally, which puts him at less risk of eating a flying knee, perhaps. In his fight against Movsar, I noticed how two of his takedowns were counters. There was the spinning back fist in round three and the lead hook in round two, and the timing was so damn impeccable. I also noticed how in the first round, he landed a 1-2 on Movsar that really got his attention, and then he feinted it again, then went downstairs with a double leg that caught Movsar off guard, and I was just like, wow, bro, this guy's so freaking good. Notice how strong Aljamain Sterling is. He's significantly stronger than Movsar, which is surprising because they're both very girthy. Whenever he would take Movsar down, he wouldn't only rely on technique. He would shoot for a takedown, get in body lock, lift Movsar up, then beat his face with the ground. At no point did Movsar do that to Aljo. Whenever he would take Aljo down, it was always using judo techniques or this technique that Perion likes using where he gets you against the cage, pulls your waist towards him, and then he trips you simultaneously, eventually taking you down. It doesn't rely on picking you up, which makes it significantly easier when you're the weaker opponent. And we saw that with Movsar Evloev. What I find interesting is that on paper, Aljamain Sterling is shorter than Movsar Evloev. Aljamain is 5'7". I think that's his actual height. Movsar Evloev is listed as 5'8". And we saw them take a picture together, and you could clearly tell that Aljamain Sterling was the taller opponent. His shoulders are broader. Just everything about him, you can tell he's about an inch taller than Movsar, and I don't think anyone can dispute that at this point. They took a picture together for crying out loud. It kind of reminds me of when Michael Bisping took a picture with Dricus, and they both listed at 6'1". Maybe one's at the upper percentile of 6'1" and one's at the lower percentile, but come on, guys. Dude, Dricus looked like about an inch taller than Michael Bisping. I'm only saying an inch because of angles. I know Michael's not significantly shorter than Dricus, but he definitely is. And the same goes for Movsar with Aljamain Sterling. And I could also tell that Aljo looked way girthier than Movsar in that pick, bro. And it's the reason why he was bullying him around in that fight. Because I asked myself, like, Movsar, like, you're a wrestler, bro. How are you getting bullied like this? And it only makes sense because they had a similar level of skill. I do believe Movsar is slightly more skilled. I say slightly because it was a very close fight, and Aljamain is stronger. But that clearly wasn't enough of an advantage for him to win because Movsar has high fight IQ. I think one major part of his game was reversals. You see, when you're a good wrestler, right, you're able to control your opponents on the ground. And one thing that helps is getting them in a body lock. Once you have someone in a body lock, they're pretty much immobile, but then you have to do damage. So you have to release the body lock temporarily, then land ground and pound or attempt a submission. That's easy when you're going up against a striker because even when they're no longer in body lock, they're just unable to explode or get out of that position or scramble into an advantageous position because of the lack of skill. But when you're going up against another wrestler, if you release the body lock and try to attempt ground and pound, he's going to reverse you. And Mofsar did that to Aljamain Sterling at least 3 times. Aljo had a few reversals of his own, but the one who did it the most was Mofsar by far. And I think that was part of the reason why he won the fight because Aljamain Sterling is a very boring fighter at times. That's when he's going up against someone who just can't defend his wrestling. And that's probably why they don't like him that much. But when you're going up against another wrestler, it's pretty hard to be boring because you won't be able to keep them in one position for a very long time. Lastly, I would like to address how some people think this fight was a robbery and Aljo was the rightful winner. That cannot be more far from the truth. And let's get one thing out the way. Aljo did win the first round, and according to the scorecards of all the judges, Aljo won the first round and the last two were Mofsar's, and that's identical to mine as well. And I don't think it's a coincidence that all three of the judges scored it that way. Maybe that's just the actual truth. And I'm not saying it's the truth because they scored it because they get a lot of fights wrong, but that's just more evidence that backs up the claim that Mofsar was the rightful winner. And to anyone that thinks Aljo was the rightful winner, I highly recommend you rewatch the last 2 rounds and you score it based on damage. And according to the judging criteria, damage is above all things. The argument people make for Aljo winning was control time, but he would control Mobsaw on the ground without landing any significant strikes. There was a round where I counted about 2 significant strikes for Aljo, whereas Mobsaw Vloyev was landing short hooks over and over again, advancing the position, scrambling. Sure, Aljo may have had the better of the grappling exchanges in one of the last 2 rounds, but still, if you look at damage, Mavsar was the rightful winner. And I don't see how I don't get it. People say it was a robbery. I don't understand. Rewatch the fight. Aljo wasn't landing significant strikes. He was just bullying Mavsar around, and Mavsar was the one who did more damage. People need to stop crying robbery for every single fight. You're not a professional judge, so the least you can do is rewatch the fight at least twice. I just rewatched that and cringed, man. I'm way too passionate about this. But let me know what you think in the comments. Is this the greatest representation of wrestling? Are they better fights? Let me know. Anyway, like and subscribe. Peace out.